The next quote that I'm going to be analyzing is from Gatsby's tour of his mansion for Daisy when they first see each other again. And so it's focused on talking about his shirts. And this is going to end up showing just how materialistic Daisy is. So you start out, he opened for us 2 hulking patent cabinets which held his masked suits and dressing gowns and ties, and his shirts, piled like bricks in stacks a dozen high. So right off the bat, it's just a list of everything he had, and then it's also talking about how neat it is, piled like bricks. And then Gatsby goes on to kind of humble brag about, I've got a man in England who buys me clothes. He sends over a selection of things at the beginning of each season, spring and fall. He's casually mentioning that he pays someone to spend his money, which probably Tom doesn't even do. And then also, since it's at the beginning of each season, he doesn't need all of these shirts and to be constantly getting new shirts, and it's showing how excessive his lifestyle is. And then he took out a pile of shirts and began throwing them one by one before us, shirts of sheer linen and thick silk and fine flannel which lost their folds as they fell and covered the table in many-colored disarray. And so since he's just throwing them and they end up in many-colored disarray, he's taking this stack of shirts that was like bricks and just messing it up, which can be taken as a metaphor for he's willing to mess up and change everything in his life for Daisy, but it also means that he probably doesn't care about the work that went into making them neat and what's going to have to happen for them to be neat and like bricks in stacks a dozen high again, because he has all of these servants. And then also he could have just simply laid them out, but that would be a lot less dramatic. And then it's a list of the different fabrics of the shirts, and they're pretty nice fabric. I mean, silk, very fancy. And then while we admired, he brought more, and the soft, rich heat mounted higher. Shirts with stripes and scrolls and plaids in coral and apple green and lavender and faint orange with monograms of Indian blue. So with this one, it's again listing, and most of it's coming one right after the other, stripes, scrolls, plaids, and they're much more abrupt. Overall, I think the pacing of this paragraph, at least when I read it to myself, I go faster with the lists, and having in it this hyphen kind of makes it break in with this longer list, but then that is kind of stopped in its tracks, having this suddenly, sorry about that, suddenly with a strange sound, Daisy bent her head into the shirts and began to cry stormily. And this is the first point in meeting Gatsby where she gets emotional. Not when she first saw him, not the conversation she had with him, nothing else in the house made her cry. But this blatant display of wealth, throwing these shirts at her, talking about the man he pays to spend his money, shows just how materialistic he is. And knowing that he's now extremely rich, it's possible that she's regretting not choosing him and instead choosing Tom. They're such beautiful shirts, she sobbed, her voice muffled in the thick folds. It makes me sad because I've never seen such beautiful shirts before. And that's her explanation for why she's crying. She's not saying, I love the fact that you can have these shirts and that's why I'm crying. She's saying it's just because they're beautiful shirts. And they sound like they are beautiful shirts, but probably not beautiful enough for me to cry. And so overall, this is highlighting how materialistic Daisy is, and it seems like she's always been this materialistic, but then also how materialistic Gatsby has become. Starting out, he didn't really have much, so he couldn't be very materialistic and focused on those material goods because he couldn't afford them. But now that he can, he is focusing on getting more and more and having it be very nice and fancy and thick silk and fine flannel, yada, yada, yada. And just having large amounts of this stuff and showing it off to everyone, but especially to Daisy.